here because I know you're thirsty.
You don't like the Wait, what do we? Okay, so again, you need your notebook where you keep your notes.
Oh, it is on the thing, and I didn't write them. Somewhere in here. Yes,
On my knee. Okay, raise your hand if I did not give you a name tag. No, you sorry.
Okay, guys, as they're getting ready, I wanted to talk to you a few minutes. We have several teachers in the room today, and I'm going to ask them to go around and introduce themselves to you so you can know who is teaching you today.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Truelove. It's nice to meet you.
Ms. Cal, your media specialist.
Yes.
My name is Tia Peretta. I teach 8th grade at North Hall Middle. Thanks for having me. Can't wait to learn with and from you guys.
And hi, I'm Mrs. Nash from North Hall Middle School, and I'm super excited to hang out with you guys and read with you guys, and I know you are going to teach us some amazing things too, so it's very nice to meet you.
And I am Miss Jackson, and I came a long way. I'm from Kentucky. Anyone ever heard of the Kentucky Derby?
Kentucky Fried Chicken.
And Kentucky Fried Chicken, actually, yes, that is the home of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Well, we thank all of you for coming today. I want to ask you something. Has any of you ever tried something new? Have you tried to get better at something? What do you have to do in order to get better at something? Practice. Well, what else? Keep trying. Well, that's what I'm doing today. These teachers are here to help me become a better teacher and to teach me some new tools to use in the classroom. So we're all working together today to do this lesson. So if you look on the board, we'll have our learning target. We want you to be able to analyze different text structures and apply appropriate strategies for reading comprehension as demonstrated through your reflective notes. So you will need to take notes throughout this lesson. And you can use the note-taking strategies that we have taught you so far. Okay? So to start with our warm-up.
And I've been told that you guys have been reading some different types of, you've been learning about different types of text, yes? Okay, is anybody raising your hand and tell me what's one type of text that you've been learning about recently? Volunteer, I can volunteer. You look interested. What kind of text you've been learning about? It's okay. Tell me about informational text. Have you been reading about informational text or learning about informational text? No.
We just started it, actually.
You just started it. Okay. So informational text is when we learn about what? I mean, what does that word mean? Information. Yes, you're 8th graders. You're smart, right? So informational text, you're reading about actual information. Okay. Anybody know the other type that you guys read before that? I believe it's the narrative, right? Anybody ever had a narrator read something to them before? A story. A story? Yes? Okay. Huh? Yes, Ms. Voss. Okay, so she narrates to you, sometimes she reads to you. What do you think the difference is in informational and narrative writing? Somebody tell me what's one difference, do you know? You've just started talking about it, but narrative is usually a story of some sort, right? And information is actual factual information, right? Okay, so in your head I want you to think for just a minute, which would you rather read? Because some of us, you usually tend to want to read one more than the other. Do we agree with that statement? Okay, so I'm going to ask you to think about it for just a second, all right? And then everybody hold up your right hand. So everybody hold up your right hand, super high. Come on, high, high, high. Okay, now put it down. Everybody hold up your left hand for me. Okay, all right, so in just a second, after you think about it for just a second, if you think that you would rather read more stories or narrative, I want you to raise your left hand, okay? But not only do you have to think about it, I want you to think about the why. Why do you think you'd rather, okay? And then in just a second, I'm going to ask you if you think you'd rather read more information or ideas, you're going to raise your right hand. But you've also got to think about why you would want to. Okay, so think about it for a second. All right, so if you think you'd rather read narrative or stories, raise your left hand. Left, left, left. Ooh, okay. Emily, tell me why do you think you'd rather read more narrative or stories? More interesting? I like it. All right. Brittany, you said you raised your hand for narrative. Why do you think you'd rather read more narrative or stories? Oh, you can picture in your head. I like that one. That's a really, really good idea. Somebody over here had their hand raised. See me. Oh, it was you. Okay. Why do you think you would rather read more narrative or stories?
They're more interesting and intriguing.
Interesting and intriguing. That's okay. You can go next.
I was gonna say because they're so interesting.
It is interesting. Interesting and intriguing. That was a super awesome word. Yes. All right. So then that means the rest of you raise your right hand. Oh, everybody that didn't raise their left hand, raise their right hand. That means you would much rather read information or ideas, right? Why do you think you'd rather read information or ideas?
Because I like history.
Oh, she likes history. That's a really good reason. All right, Lucy, why do you think you would rather read information, facts?
I want for the color.
Oh, you went for the yellow. Well, go ahead and tell me why.
Because they're like
Oh, more interesting. Okay. Cynthia, why do you think you'd rather read more information or ideas?
I'm for the yellow one.
Why did you not raise your hand?
I did, I was like, oh.
Okay, so somebody else that wanted information or ideas, raise your hand. Seriously? All right, so information. If you like history, if you like facts, right, then you really like to read this more. If you like stories, then maybe you like to read this more, but sometimes these two can go together. You know that? And even if you just like one more than the other, sometimes when you put them together, you find, oh, I kind of like that one more than I thought I did, right? So if we're looking at our learning target today, we're going to be looking at strategies to comprehend what we're reading when we mix both of these things together. Because sometimes you're going to have both of these mixed together. It's my understanding you guys all have a book that you've chosen to read, right? Yes? Okay, so hopefully by the end of the day, we're going to be able to see how both of these will apply in what you've actually chosen to read.
So today I want to teach you that literary nonfiction readers use narrative and informational reading strategies flexibly. Now, what this means is that as you read a literary nonfiction book, you have to be alert. Notice when the text reads more like a story and when the text reads more like an informational article. It matters because the structure will often give you clues how you might read a text and fully learn from that part. Now, what text have we been reading aloud? What was the name of it? It was about NASA and Dorothy.
Oh,
Hidden Figures. So I want to read a part of Hidden Figures today, and I want you to think whether or not this is using more of a story plan, it's using more of a story, or is it using more information? And it's called The Colored Computers. You can take notes as I'm reading. Is it reading more like a story, or is it giving more information? The Colored Computers. On her first day at work at Langley, Dorothy Vaughn spent the morning in the personnel department filling out paperwork. As part of her orientation, she held up her right hand and swore the United States Civil Service Oath of Office. I, Dorothy Vaughn, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. She took the pledge seriously, but it was her identification badge that made her feel like an official employee. the badge, a blue metal circle featuring the image of her face with the wing NACA logo on either side. It granted her access to the various facilities at the Langley Laboratory. Turn to your partner and tell your partner whether or not you think this is more like a story or is it giving more information.
What makes it a story?
So, what do you think, guys? I think most of you said it's more like a what? Story. It's more like a story. You can picture this scene in your mind, can't you? What Dorothy was saying, what she was doing, what she was thinking. Here's the thing, readers. Identifying which part is more informational or more narrative is going to be pretty easy for you. What's trickier is making sure that because you're alert to this being a story or a narrative part, you push yourself to infer about characters. Right there, like we did last bin. About characters, traits, problems, issues they face. All the work we did when we read our narratives. Today, I want to give you a bookmark. And on one side it says, readers of stories think about. And the other side it says, readers of informational text think about. And you're going to use this bookmark later on in the classroom, class period, to analyze parts of the text we're going to read today. So, if you look, readers of stories think about character traits, multiple traits, conflicting traits, unlikable traits, how characters interact with settings, motivations and conflict, hidden issues and multiple themes. All that work we did last bin on when we were talking about narrative text. So, if you look at the other side, the green side, you'll see readers of informational text think about how parts fit together, key vocabulary words, multiple central ideas, and supporting details. I'm going to read this section again, and as I'm reading, I want you to think about some of the details on this bookmark that you may not have thought of before. The colored computers. On her first day at work at Langley, Dorothy Bond spent the morning in the personnel department filling out paperwork. As part of her orientation, she held up her right hand and swore the United States Civil Service oath of office. I, Dorothy Bond, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. She took the pledge seriously, but it was her identification badge that made her feel like an official employee. The badge, a blue metal circle featuring an image of her face with the wing NACA logo on either side. It granted her access to the various facilities at Langley Laboratory. Now pick something from this bookmark right now. What narrative thinking word will help you get more of the part we just read? So look at the bookmark on narrative thinking. What part of the bookmark would help you thinking about what I just read? What was Dorothy feeling? What was she feeling when she was working there? Happy. Can you be more specific? Do you think she felt pride? Why? Okay, she felt like an employee. Why would be an employee at the Langley Laboratory be different than being an employee somewhere else? Huh? We talked about it yesterday. Was this kind of job rare for someone like Dorothy to have? Can you tell me more about that, Connor?
Because they're like good jobs for them, and they're like more bad jobs.
Okay. So you're for them. Who are you specifically talking about? Okay, you're talking about African Americans. Okay, because this kind of job was almost unheard of at this time in history for an African American woman to have. What were educated African American women most likely to do at this time? Be a teacher, right. So, can you think, what does it say about hidden issues? Is there anything that she might be thinking about? See, she took the pledge seriously. What made her feel like an official employee that she wore? Her badge. Do you think she wore that with respect? Why? Do you respect your country? Do you think she respected her country? Yes. So she probably wore it with a lot of respect as well. So, can you feel how with just a little bit more attention to Dorothy as a character, you think about how she's interacting with this particular setting, what it means to her? When you think about what she's thinking, what motivates her, how she's feeling, how she's proud of where she is, you can see that she has accomplished a lot, right? And she's put in some skills that she has to work that maybe she's never been able to do so before, or anyone like her. So, let's read on.
Alright, so the next part, remember I told you guys sometimes you're going to see informational text and sometimes you're going to see narrative text. And sometimes you are going to have a mix of both. So it's really important to know how to figure out which one is which. And this bookmark is one of those ways to help you figure out, one of those strategies that you can use to help you figure out which one is which. Okay? So follow along with me while I read this part. And while I'm reading, I want you to think to yourself, and you can use your bookmark, is this informational text that she's reading or is this a story that she's reading to? Okay? And once again, you can use both sides of your bookmark to try and think, okay? Since its establishment in 1917, the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory's operations have been concentrated on the campus of Langley Field, an Army Air Corps base located on the eastern bank of Hampton's Back River. The service building, where Dorothy went through orientation, was one of the oldest buildings on the field. Year after year, the number of buildings had grown until the laboratory decided to expand to the area on the western side of the river. That land was still a forest when the construction began, and employees joked about having to work in such a remote place. Remote means not with everybody else. The weekly Langley employee newsletter, Air Scoop, described it as a land of desolation, a land of marshes and mosquitoes. Does anybody know what the word desolation means? If something is desolate. Have you ever heard that word before? No? Alright, so desolate means it's just kind of out to the side and forgotten about. Have you ever seen a building before that looked desolate? It's kind of out to the side and forgotten about. Alright, so try to put yourself in her position, right? That's how she's feeling. But in trying to decide what kind of text this is, I'm going to give you just a second to talk to your elbow partner, okay? I want you to turn to them and I want you to agree together, what do you think this is? Do you think this is informational? Do you think this is narrative? Or do you think it's both? Right? I'll give you just a minute to talk. Okay?
So using your bookmarks. Using your bookmarks. What you just read. Was it just something? What do you have? Tell me why.
One of the very first things that we had.
Let's refer back to our bookmarks that we were given, okay? So let's use this as a cheat sheet. You're not allowed to cheat a lot in school, but this is one of those ways. So let's take a look at, I think it's informational. What was some of the vocabulary that she was using? She was explaining informational or if you flip it over, was it more interest? Did it talk to us about conflict? What do you guys think? That can happen. That can happen when we're reading. When we read so much that we forget it, that we're forgetting. When she said she's not desolate, you feel like left out. Would that go into conflicts? If she's having an internal conflict? Yeah, when it talks about that. But it's the oldest book.
Tell us things about her. Exactly.
Do you think that reading? Yeah.
Pay attention.
Picture it. Make a movie.
And listen to things that isn't telling us the story or is giving you the facts. Since its established in 1917, the language
It's okay.
has been concentrated on the campus of Langwood Field, an Army
Alright, so
Air Space located on the eastern bank of the Mountain Factory.
give you just another minute.
This building, where Dorothy went through orientation, was one of the oldest buildings on the field. Year after year, different buildings have grown after the laboratory decided to expand to the area on the western side.
Just information?
That land was still a forest when the construction began.
Get updates. Did it tell me anything else that might have been informational? See, y'all are your information. So what else? Do you remember others?
Described it as a
Did it give me
land
places?
of desolation,
Specific places?
marshes, and
Did it give me any characters?
so is that more of a story, or is that more informative? Is it giving like more facts?
So, I mean, she's a real person who knows information. Yeah.
So what are some
Does it tell me,
facts
like, do you remember if it's
that
anything
you
that she built?
you've heard?
She bothers to tell us that the place that she was nice. And she bothered to tell us that.
And do you remember when it was built? 1970. That's a long time ago. Anything else about it? How did that building have any meaning to Dorothy?
Well, where she worked.
Give me some support.
How would you like to review?
Or I can take it maybe a different way, so we hear some information that's coming, we hear some informative information, key facts. However, were there some parts of that paragraph that she was reading that made a plot?
What do you think?
Meaning, did we hear about the setting, did we hear about the characterization?
Use the word people. I like that one.
And if so, what?
Well, they wanted some people
What
to
was
go, and they
something
wanted
that
some people
made
to
a
go.
movie in your brain when we were serving that to you?
Maybe. Let me ask you a question. If I told you that I wanted you to go out, but I wanted you to go out that way out back to the part that looked like run down.
What else?
That's okay. Y'all gonna go to mine? Okay. Where nobody's at, nobody can see. How you think that make you feel?
You're making a connection. Okay. Okay, when you hear field, that's what.
I'd be like,
What about you guys? What
so
piece
imagine
of
how
that,
people feel, right?
what piece of that, because there was a part that, did you get more information or did it make you think of a story? Okay. That's what I was
It
envisioning.
has a dark village, okay? I like that. It was built on a marsh. Does anyone know what that is?
Marsh is kind of like, swamp.
Alright, so I got to talk to a lot of you. I've gotten to know a lot of you already, and we've only been in here, what, maybe 10 minutes? I had lots of different ideas. If you thought this was mostly informational, raise your right hand. I had a lot of you tell me it was informational. You're not wrong. It is informational, okay? How do you know that it was informational? I had lots of good talk over here. How did you guys know it was informational? What was the number one thing you said? It's one thing, and you can use your bookmark. What does it say? Informational text give us what? Sometimes they give us dates. Okay, this one gave us a date, right? Go ahead and sit up, I can hear you. Alright, so what else did it give us? And it's stuff that you've already talked about, right? It told us specific actual places in the world, yes? Ladies over here, what did y'all say? How did y'all know it was informational? What'd you tell me? Say it again. Street names. Okay, so actual, factual things. Alright. I had some people, though, that told me they thought that it was a little bit narrative. Did anybody over here at this table feel like it was narrative? Like it told a story? Did you think it felt like a story? Yes? Okay. Why do you think it felt like a story? You're not wrong. Just tell me what you think.
I envisioned that it was like an abandoned building.
Oh, he envisioned that it was an abandoned building, which is really good, right? Why do you think she bothered to tell us that it was an abandoned building? I know we talked about it over here. Why do you think that mattered? Cynthia, you do know. Tell me, what'd you say? You got this, girl. Go.
I didn't say anything.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
It was Dulce.
Okay, Dulce, what'd you say? Why not argue over the right answer? Come on, tell me. So you said it matters because why? That was her way of trying to show us how she what?
She feels.
How she feels. Thank you.
Good job.
Okay? So it's exactly right. Good job. Alright, so she's trying to tell us, now did she say, this makes me feel really bad?
No.
No. Right? If she were writing to 6th graders, she might say, this made me feel really bad, but she's not. She's writing to 8th graders or people that are older, right? So she can tell you and describe for you the building was desolate, and she's hoping by that you can infer that I'm telling you this for a reason, right? There's a purpose to it. Alright, so do you see how we can mix those two sometimes? Yes? Alright, let's keep reading. The second part says, and you guys, it would be, I know, I wish I had the text to give you because sometimes it's harder as I'm reading it again. If you need me to read another part, I'll be glad to read it for you. But, you know, as you're thinking, and we have an idea over here, if you and your partner, if one of you will turn to informational text on yours, and the other person will turn to, so that you have two that are right next to each other like this, that might be easier for you to look together, okay? And I'll tell you like I tell my kids, I will believe anything as long as you can back it up, right? How do we back up what we believe in language arts? Somebody raise your hand and say it again. Say it again. Restate. That's super awesome. What do we usually use when we restate, though? Well, yes, but what do we always have to do? We use evidence, right? So if you can back it up with evidence from the text, you can use a because. I know this because, right? So you say, I know this is true because, I'll believe you, okay? So let's listen as I read the second part. After Dorothy finished the morning's paperwork, she boarded a campus shuttle that drove her to the end of a forested back road connecting the east side of the Langley campus with the west side. She's being a lot of detail, right? She looked around at the strange landscape of two-story brick offices and construction sites with half-finished buildings. So there's construction. Towering behind one of the buildings was a gigantic 3-story high ribbed metal pipe. It was part of a wind tunnel called the 16-foot-high speed tunnel, which was used for experiments on airplanes. That's pretty cool. To make the scene even more unusual, all of the buildings had been painted dark green to camouflage them against possible attacks from America's wartime enemies. The shuttle bus stopped to let Dorothy off at the front door of an office building called the Warehouse Building. She went inside and found rooms filled with desks arranged classroom style. Kind of like, you know, classrooms in rows. Y'all remember? Anyway. Okay. There were office bright ceiling lights and narrow windows that looked out over the construction going on outside. From inside the rooms, Dorothy heard a new, unfamiliar sound. The steady beat of mechanical calculating machines. Anybody know what a calculating machine is? Anybody ever seen like a ginormous calculator? It's like this big by this big. You have? Or they're noisy. Yes, very noisy. Okay, so try to imagine. Very noisy. So big they took up an entire desktop. So imagine, if you will, that's a ginormous calculator, right? It was like listening to a parade of drums, each time a click when a number was entered. a drum beat when the operations key was hit, and a full drum roll when the machine ran through a complex calculation. She sounds excited about numbers, right? The same scene and the same sounds played in all the rooms where the women were working. Women were performing the same work at a similar place on the east side. The only difference between the east computers and the west computers was obvious. All of the women sitting at the desks in Dorothy's workspace were black. Okay? So think again. I want you and your partner to talk for just a minute or two. All right? You're going to look at your bookmark. You're going to ask yourself questions. Is this informational? Gave us a lot of information, right? Is this narrative, or is it a mix of both? And I'll believe whatever you tell me, as long as you say, because, I know because, here's how I know. Okay? Any questions about what you're supposed to do? All right, I'll give you a minute or two to talk with your other partner.
It was like this book.
What makes you say that? Were there any what it was
Alright, so
does it matter that she just told that she
and during this period of time, do you think that was there's some of those facts that people use back then it was talking about details.
She told us that women in building water
Do you think there were any hidden issues? Okay, so she was working exactly as best she was pleased to have you. But what was her working she heard lots of noise and people.
This was written and this was
Is there anything in mind that this area of part who was people that she was working with? How did she interact? Did she interact with any of the you say about her marriage, which one is that? Strong or is it remember, you're right. As long as you she was a strong.
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear it?
People that what else? The march over their sheet. She was so excited for the
She had a couple of very unusual women areas. She was very This is
I heard a lot of good ideas.
Here's a lot of good ideas too. How many of you in here think it's just informational? How many of you just think it's narrative? How many of you think it's both? Oh, every hand should be raised while you're not raising your hands. Come on. Okay. So yes, definitely. Thank you, Father. That's right. So definitely it's both, right? But tell me why. How do you know it's both? Did it give us character traits?
Yes.
About Dorothy. Right. So that is an example of narrative or informational. Remind me again. I can hear you. What?
Narrative.
Narrative. Yes. Okay.
How is Dorothy feeling?
Yes.
Why? Why was she upset?
Ooh, disappointed. That's a good one.
Why?
Because whenever she got there, they were still doing segregation.
Disappointing. That's disappointing.
She wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, she wasn't expecting that. I know this day when we talked about, it was finally time that women could go out and work. They were excited. And then they got there and it was kind of a disappointment because they weren't exactly, that wasn't what they thought it was going to be, right? And those girls, we talked about that. Y'all are about to go to high school. You're about to go out into the world, right? Yeah? What about information? I know. Information. What information did it give you? Still gave us some different information. Anybody remember any of the information? Did it tell us specific things about Langley? Yeah, gave us some actual factual information about it, so it was a good mix of both. Did it tell you, stop, I'm about to tell you informational text, or stop, I'm about to tell you about narrative text? Or was it kind of mixed in there together? It was mixed in there together. So if we're looking at our learning target, we got to be able to know what strategies there are to be able to pick out both, right? So that we can say at the end of today that, yes, thumbs up, I know that I can do that. I can pick out both of those, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
If I am reading informational pieces, what strategies do I need to pay attention? What do I need to pay attention to, and what strategies can I use to help me? This is a very quiet group. I don't think I've ever seen such a quiet group of middle school students at all. I have a middle school granddaughter, and she never stops talking, so I know that you all talk. So if I'm reading informational text, what would be a good strategy? All right, so I want to pay attention to vocabulary, right? Anything else that I need to pay attention to?
What did you say?
Yes.
Central ideas.
Say it again.
Central ideas.
I'm old, I can't hear.
Central ideas.
Central idea. I really need to pay attention to what is the central idea that the author is trying to get across. Now, once I know the central idea, what else do I need to pay attention to?
For us, what do you say?
I need to pay attention to the supporting details, because everything that's around that central idea, all the details should go back and support that. Now, let's suppose, we have another one?
Yeah,
You
you
heard
said key vocabulary.
Key vocabulary, yeah, we mentioned that over here.
Valencia, do you remember what yours was?
Now,
The very last one on your book.
I'm an old woman and I've forgotten a little bit about how I need to approach a narrative. And I love reading narratives. I love stories, especially if I'm at the beach. Anyone like to go to the beach and just read stories?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate to
Or
say
you like to go to the beach and create
You don't like to
stories
say
when you get home?
Okay. Well, now, when I am reading a story, how do I approach that differently than I would informational pieces? What would my mind need to pay attention to as a reader? Help me, I'm old.
Like Mark like, let me think about that for a second. Let me put my different lens on. It's almost like wearing two different types of glasses, right? Put on one kind of glasses to read for information, and then you put on another kind of glass. So how do we switch our thinking for narratives?
Okay, you could actually use some of the information on that bookmark. I like that idea, since you have it in front of you. Right.
You also have all of our charts from the previous units that you could refer back to.
So what do I need to pay attention to? Character traits. Now, does it just come right out and tell me those traits?
No.
I have to pay attention to actions, dialogue, relationship, Theme, I want to pay attention to the theme because there's something that might help me be a better person, right? Anything else that I could do to be a better reader of narratives? How many of you see a movie playing in your head when you read? Okay. How many of you just have nothing rolling around up there when you read?
Jasmine, that's not true. I know it.
No, it's true. All right, so one of the things I want to pay attention to is character traits. I had a teacher that once told me that if I didn't understand the character, I didn't understand the story. And would you say that? How many of you would agree with that? If I don't understand the character, I don't understand the story.
You don't understand.
Just raise your hand, let me know you're out there. Okay, so character, paying attention to the character development, how they talk, their interactions, that's very important. What about plot? Do I need to pay attention to that? What is plot? I was at a high school one time and I asked a kid what plot was, and he said that's where they bury people.
Giovanni has an answer for you. Giovanni, what's the plot?
Are the main events of the story?
Say it again.
He said all the main events in the story.
All right, good.
Good job.
All right, I'm from Kentucky. I've learned a lot about reading from you guys.
All right, so I would like to direct your eyes up here to the board. And I want to talk about our learning target with you one more time. So if you look up here, what we are asking for you today is that you would be able to analyze different text structures and apply appropriate strategies for reading comprehension as demonstrated through what? What does it say? Reflective notes, okay? We want you guys to be taking reflective notes during the session today. So I want us to pause for a moment, and I want to make sure that I see a sheet of paper out in front of each one of you, a pencil, okay? I want to see those reflective notes, okay? And as we move into this last part of our read aloud, I want you to make sure that you can see both sides of your bookmark, okay? Again, as we mentioned to you earlier, maybe with your elbow partner, put those bookmarks side by side so that you can see both sides and not have to be flipping back and forth, okay? So I want to see those note sheets out and a pencil, okay? And as I begin reading this last section for us today, I want you to be listening very carefully for things like character traits, okay? How are the characters in this story interacting with the setting, okay? And then thinking about how all of the parts that we have heard today fit together, okay? So be thinking about, we've given you these bookmarks are also, thinking prompts, okay? So be thinking about these topics as I read. The room for the West Area Computing Pool was set up for about 20 workers. As members of a pool, each woman had to be ready to work on any mathematical assignment that came through the door. Because the engineering problems that the Langley Laboratory worked on were so complex, the problems had to be broken down into smaller parts, with each part assigned to a different woman. So let's think about that paragraph for just a moment. Let's pause and let's make some notes. Okay, let's pause and let's make some notes. Okay, listen again. The room for the West Area Computing Pool was set up for about 20 workers. As members of a pool, each woman had to be ready to work on any mathematical assignment that came through the door. Because the engineering problems that the Langley Laboratory worked on were so complex, the problems had to be broken down into smaller parts, with each part assigned to a different woman. So turn to your elbow partner and share what you heard. What did you learn in that paragraph?
So what did you learn in that paragraph? What area? Okay, so that's anything else?
They were all saying that
Okay, everybody got a different job. Any other details?
So how many people would fit?
It would be nice to have that.
Even if you need to draw what you heard. Sometimes, I'm a visual learner, so all those words at me, I'm like, what? So the pictures that you're seeing in your head, like that room that's set up for how many people? 20 people. What else did you hear her read? Even if you're note taking.
Alright, would someone like to share out what you noticed? Would someone raise your hand? Be bold, share with us what you noticed in your reading.
Emily, what'd you say?
Alright, because, how do we know that?
What'd you say, Connor? They had to be prepared.
Because what? Alright, listen as I read the next section. Dorothy Vaughn took a seat, and the women welcomed her. Most had graduated from black colleges like Hampton Institute, the Virginia State College for Negroes, or Arkansas Agricultural, Mechanical, and Normal College. Many of the women had teaching experience. Others were starting their first jobs just out of college. Take a moment. Write some notes. Dorothy Vaughn took a seat, and the women welcomed her. Most had graduated from black colleges like Hampton Institute, the Virginia State College for Negroes, or Arkansas Agricultural, Mechanical, and Normal College. Many of the women had years of teaching experience. Others were starting their first jobs out of college. Alright, someone share out. What did you hear? Someone share. What did you learn from that paragraph? What did you learn about our characters?
College.
We learned the colleges that they had attended, exactly. Okay? So we're learning more about the background, the educational background of these women. Alright, if you listen up, I'm going to read the last paragraph. Quite a few of the women belonged to the same civic organizations, churches, and Greek letter organizations such as Alpha Kappa Alpha or Delta Sigma Theta. Dorothy realized that by working in Langley's West Computing sections, she was in one of the world's most exclusive groups. In 1940, just 2% of all black women earned college degrees, and about 60% of those women became teachers, most in public elementary and high schools. At a time when just 10% of white women and not even a third of white men had earned college degrees, the West computers had found jobs at the single best and biggest aeronautical research complex in the world. So there's a lot of super important details in this paragraph. Let me read it one more time and make your notes. Quite a few of the women belonged to the same civic organizations, churches, and Greek letter organizations, such as Alpha Kappa Alpha or Delta Sigma Theta. Dorothy realized that by working in Langley's West Computing section, she was in one of the world's most exclusive groups. In 1940, just 2% of all black women earned college degrees, and 60% of those women became teachers, most in public elementary and high schools. At a time when just 10% of white women and not even a third of white men had earned college degrees, the West computers had found jobs at the single best and biggest aeronautical research complex in the world.
All right, guys, just a few more seconds to finish up your notes. Thank you guys for taking those reflective notes. That is a piece of your learning target for today. You guys are doing an awesome job taking what you're hearing and applying it and creating your notes. And as you get done, if you wouldn't mind laying your pencil down and making eye contact with me so I know you're ready. Thank you. Okay, so today in your language arts class, I'm going to refer back to your learning target. You have analyzed different text structures. How many different text structures? A lot. Tell me what two? Information and what else? And narrative. Good job. And you have applied appropriate strategies. Okay, you guys did a really good job. What I want to do is I want to give you a job. So I would like this group, I want to hire you to be a narrative strategy. Okay? For this group, I'd like to give you a job. You're going to be our informational strategy. And for this group, I would like for you guys to take and tell me the similarities of both of the strategies. So let me recap that. This group, you're going to tell me the strategies you need to have in order to better comprehend what type of text? Narrative. This group, you're going to tell me the strategies you need to better comprehend what kind of text? Information. And you guys have to tell me what those two have in common. Good job. So the post-its that you have on your desk, I want you to work together. Okay, so this is our closing. You don't have to write anything except I do want you to report back to me in post-it mode. Meaning, share your ideas. What strategies do you have? What strategies do you have? And what are the similarities between those two strategies? And as you guys write those down, come up and just pop them up here so we can refer to them at a later time. Okay? Thumbs up if you understand what I'm asking. That means no one? Okay. He understands. Thank you.
Anybody, y'all understand what y'all doing?
Okay.
Got one.
No, I'm not.
We have one.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, now we're together.
You're going to get up, stretch your legs. Go pop that up there. Come on. Good job. What strategies do you guys need to understand? Appreciate you.
Oh my gosh, we leave it at 4 minutes.
The information is like 3 to 0. Okay, here we go. Think about similarities.
That's because it was a good idea, so it's somewhere.
Which strategies do you need to understand? Let's talk about it. Just right now. Character inspiration. Let's write that down. Let's say that we need to maybe visualize the plot. Exactly, that'd be a good one too. In your own words, I like it even better. My first one was coming in for the steal.
Narrative, let's get some up there. I got one.
Wasn't the first one. Kudos to her.
Excuse me. Whatever you're eating. There you go, Hector.
I thought you said pretty on the side,
Yes, these bookmarks are for you to keep in your book that you're reading.
It won't fit.
Where's
mine?
Alright guys, we've got 5, 4, if you have any more to do, get them up here. 3, 2, 2, coming, and 1. So, up here we have for a narrative, that's this team over here. You have to read between the lines. I really like that one. We need to picture the setting. We need to talk about character traits, hidden issues. Good job. I really like those. Informational. You guys put that. I need to pay attention to my key vocabulary, and especially those supporting details. It tells me why. Why is this important? Why is this a key idea? How things fit together. So the coherence of those texts, and the multiple central ideas. So good job. And lastly, we have similarities. We have a lot on here. You guys did a lot of thinking. We have themes. They're both describing things. They both are similar because they have issues and motivations. I like that one. They are both describing, giving facts, giving details. Both can tell stories, and some might have feelings or some might have information. So, can you give yourself and your classmates a hand